not. Clarkson is another good 4 hours north of here. Nosebleed, New York, as we like to call it. What? No, the GPS works. I like to say I can see Canada from my house, like Sarah Palin in Russia. Basically between Montreal and Ottawa, right across from Cornwall, Ontario. Okay, so I'm going to talk about big data's big problems. And are you guys here because you are well aware big data has big problems? How many people are here because you're already pretty aware of that? Okay. How many people are here because you didn't know they had big problems and you'd like to kind of know what they are? Okay, a few of those. A lot of people not committing one way or another. You probably heard the term big data lots of places, right? And that's a buzzword everywhere these days. The basic idea, when I think about big data, I normally define it as either large in the context of a huge database, so big that it would be difficult to move. Once you put it someplace, you're never going to move it. You're not going to transform it. Many times big data is also like real data sets that are messy and, have all sorts of problems in them. But I also think of big data in terms of kind of pervasive or very invasive surveillance. Lots of sensors everywhere. So it's a buzzword, and data can be big in a number of dimensions, but that gives you a sense of some. And as with many technologies, I really don't think that it is good or bad. It's just powerful or not. And in point of fact, big data is powerful for a lot of things. And although most of my talk I'm going to focus on the things I think are worth being pretty scared about. I want to start out by saying that I don't think it's fundamentally that way. Big data can help you optimize many parts of your life, understand interesting things about the world. It can help us connect with each other. I don't know if you heard some, there's some screenshots here of a website called The Human Face of Big Data, where they're using big data to combat counterfeit drugs or search for a cure for malaria or combat crime in cities or help people exercise better. All those sound good, right? Why wouldn't we want those things? Here's another thing that was in the news not too long ago. Have you heard about people trying to get environmental data sets out of the U.S. before they can be deleted? So that's just an example. People must think they're powerful for something, or they wouldn't be worried about getting them somewhere safely, or worried that somebody might be interested in getting rid of them. Just examples of the power of big data. Up here on the right, I have a screenshot out of a book I like about big data, and this basically has a newborn baby and people basically examining that baby from all sorts of angles from the very beginning. I don't know if any of you have children and that you that this may resemble you in some ways. You have captured tons and tons of data about that child already, maybe posted lots and lots of it. Here is a quote that I like a lot. It says, "Each of us now leaves a trail of digital exhaust." So here you are driving your little car through life. Like, you ever played the game of life? They get you a little car and you get like a little peg that's either blue or pink, and there you are motoring through life. And imagine you're emitting this like little stream of zeros and ones, this digital exhaust coming out your tailpipe. An infinite stream of phone records, texts, browser histories, GPS data, and other information, dun, 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 that will live on forever. I think it's entirely likely that there will be tons of data about me that lives on longer than I live on this earth. How many people think that's probably true? I think that's probably true. And I want to just think a little bit about the contents of our digital exhaust. I'm sure you're aware of all of these things, but let's just say them out loud and put them all together on a slide, and you can brainstorm with me if I have things that are missing, okay? So all your emails, if I were able to look through all of your emails, do you think I would get a pretty good picture of who you are? Interesting things about you? Right. Some people use email more than others. What about your text messages? What if I had the collection of all your text messages? Would that be pretty revealing about who you are, how you live your life? Not bad, right? Of course, there's social media, where we're very actively exporting to the world our choice of what to share. Maybe we think we're just sharing it with friends and family in some cases. Maybe in some cases we are actively exporting something that anyone can follow. Of course, it varies. What about your web browsing history? Or what about your Google search history? I think there's something incredibly revealing, maybe more revealing than just about anything else, is what you search for. You know, you think about, we're gonna sing an example later. If I gave you the collection of all of your internet searches, do you think you could recognize them as yours? I bet you could. You'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that time I thought I was sick with that and I was Googling that, or that was that time I was in Albany and I was looking for restaurants around the convention center. Do you think you could probably recognize it? Okay, so you could pick your own out. How would you feel if I said your browser history is going to be revealed? But I tell you what, I won't put your name on it. I'll just put the whole thing out there. Okay, certainly if I was going to put it out there with your name on it, I don't know that anyone would be okay with that. I don't know a single person who says, oh yeah, that's fine. Because we all search for scary personal things, right? Anyone want to vote for, I have no problem with revealing my internet search history? It makes you laugh, a nervous laugh. Please don't do that. Okay, and what if I said, I'll just strip out your name. It'll just be, anonymous searches. Would that be okay with you? It would be okay with you. Do you think that you could recognize your own? Do you think I might be able to figure out whose it was if I tried hard enough? What?
It depends on how often we're looking up ourselves, probably.
Right, so there might be, do you search for yourself? You probably could. You search for things that are near you. You search for things that, represent your location. You search for things. I have seen many an example of just latitude, longitude pairs of location. Completely anonymous, just location. And from that, you can tell who it is. Why? Because you go to work and you go where you live. And, if you take the intersection of where you work and where you live, is it just you? Many times, yes. Maybe if you work at a big place and you live in a big apartment building, maybe there's something new. But then, if you add on, you went to this psychiatrist, or there's this restaurant you like, or there's this church you go to, you think I couldn't just from lat longe pairs figure out who you were? I bet you I could. And so if I could do it from just that, you think I couldn't from all of your search history? That's richer, right, than just latitude, longitude pairs. But okay. So, web browsing history, like all the places you go, your website use, cross-site correlations, you were at one site, you went to another, or companies like DoubleClick or whatever that very actively are tracking you as you go place to place. Has any of the things that I just listed, are they stored only under your control? They're private only to you, stored only under your control? No, not a one. Okay, cell phone location, that's kind of the lat longe pairs, not completely, right? It's regions around a cell phone tower, so not as precise. Okay, let's add on our purchase history, all the things we've ever purchased. Have you ever anybody a big Amazon buyer? Go and look at your Amazon, order history. Did you notice that when you go to look at your orders, they'll make you put your password in again? I kind of appreciate that. That's a nice touch, right? They're keeping that really secret from everybody else. You ever seen the transcript of a telnet session? When you telnet, you put in your username and they echo that back to you. But then when you put in your password, they don't echo it back to you. It's just sent to the server. They're like, we're being super careful with your password. We promise. Look, we're not even showing it to you. But of course it was just announced over the network. I think it's a little bit like that. Because you purchase something on Amazon and suddenly it's being advertised to you on Facebook. It is. Right? So are they being super careful with your purchase history? They're not even showing it to you without a password, but they're showing it to lots of people without passwords. This. This is not some surprising thing. Have you ever looked at your credit card statement and just asked what that says about you? It's like, okay, yeah, every Saturday I go to the grocery store and the post office because, yeah, there's my purchases or something right? Or, oh, yeah, What about your wish lists on Amazon? The things you wish you could buy. That's potentially pretty revealing. At least in my house, just like living in a big apartment building, like everybody in my house uses my credit card. So like if I go to my purchase history or like my consumer, profile on places like Axiom. Do you guys know about Axiom or companies like that make you into a consumer profile? You can go look yourself up. If you've never done this, write this down. This is a great activity. Axiom. You can go look at what they have about you. And for me, they're totally wrong. For most people, many, many people I know, they're totally wrong. Try it and see what you think. I think it's AXIOM, something like that. I'm not the greatest speller in the world. But they have a portal where you can search your own data. Anybody find it with a quick Google search? Okay, well, fine. I turned off my data before I got up here because I'll get random, hey baby, notes. And maybe that's not the greatest thing in a talk. So I'm not going to Google. You have to do it for me. ACXIOM. So the C goes first and then the X. Thank you for that. I think maybe in my case they're wrong because my purchases reflect the activity of, a 20-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl and, who knows what else. Gifts I buy for random people. But many people who don't have that same thing, also they get it really, really wrong. And you might just want to think about that a little bit as we shift from a world in which big data is used to suggest and recommend things to us to a world in which it's used to make big decisions about your life. Like, do you get credit? Do you get a job? Do you keep your job? Do you get into this particular college? You think that that's not happening, and it seriously is already today. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go along. Okay, so we've got frequent buyer cards. You guys know how those work, right? I mean, they just want to know and track you across all your purchases in exchange for 15 cents off things, Of course, there's cameras, your own camera. Then there's cameras on the street for police or cities or whatever. You were accidentally caught in someone else's picture, like you're just at a site and they were taking a picture of themselves or their family and you're in the picture. But with facial recognition and GPS tagging in pictures, it's really hard to avoid that. I mean, what are you going to do? Walk around with like a bag over your head or something? That's not going to be a very fun life. What about Fitbits? Your heart rate, your activity throughout the day, things like when you woke up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, microphones. Does anybody mute the microphones on things or worry, things like Google's, turning the microphone on everybody, like you're doing little things like that. There's things like people wear glasses that you don't even know they're taking a picture and they're just like, when they took a picture of you, right? There's that. What about license plate readers? Did you know this? Just as you drive your car places, it isn't just like when you go through like the Easy Pass toll things, but there's lots of cameras that take pictures of your license plate here and there. You probably watch crime shows, so you know that happens. There's, passports and things like RFID-enabled IDs. Did you see the thing about, I think, January 18, all the states who, in my opinion, wisely held out against putting RFID in their driver's license are now all their citizens are going to have to get passports or other things in order to fly on airplanes? You've been following that at all? That's worth. Do you guys know the difference between something that has RFID and something that has like a magnetic strip or like one of those chips? The main difference is that the RFID-enabled things are readable at a distance, which in New York here, how many people are from New York? You live in New York. Okay, so did anybody get like an enhanced driver's license or anything like that? Well, if you get one, they will give you an RFID sleeve to put it in. So that's a nod to telling you that you might want to be aware that this has this property. But the difference is that you can just be walking down the street and someone can read it, rather than you gave them a credit card or you gave them this thing and they inserted it someplace or swiped it and so you know it was being read. And it's not like as you walk by, they read it and it says Jeanna Matthews, social security number, this, favorite color, that. It's encoded, right? But that code is the same today as it is yesterday. So if they can, just like the frequent buyer cards, they can see, oh, this ID walked by on this day and on that day and this. And then if you go in and buy something, they can then associate it with you, your credit card, and tie those things together. So, important thing to understand. What about satellite imagery? You use Google Earth and looked up your driveway and there you are sunbathing in your driveway or someone you're bending over in the garden and you're like, oh please, or who knows, right? Whatever. I'm sure you've seen those things where they say funny pictures caught on. And what about e-readers? I love this one with my students. I say I gave you this reading assignment and you come in and I say there's a quiz and you do badly on the quiz. You come in and tell me, can I have a chance to do that again? I'm just a bad test taker, but I swear I read it. Okay? What if it was an e-reader thing? And I got a report that said exactly how long you dwelled on every page. Do you think it's fair? Is that fair? Well, it's especially unfair if you didn't know. I mean, you might say you shouldn't have been lying to me in the first place, but this whole thing about what is the societal contract of do you know when you're being surveilled and in what ways? Maybe not. Have you looked up your YouTube history or your Google search history? If you've never gone and looked up your history in Google, you can see, they'll show you all the YouTube videos you ever watched or your internet search, and you can tweak the settings, I think, what they record and save and what they don't. Another one I'll mention later is the idea of massive open online courses. Has anybody ever taken one of the MOOCs? They're a great opportunity to get some great information. You guys know what I'm talking about? You guys know what those are? So you can kind of think about that as an internet-enabled learning platform, right? And we'll talk more about that one. Okay, so anyone want to add to this slide of digital exhaust? Or is this enough? Okay. Are any of these things 100% in your control? And really they're designed that way. Think about the Fitbits, for example. Have you ever seen one, that type of device, not just Fitbits, but that type of device? Have you ever seen one of them? It comes with an application that lets you connect the device, download the information, view it yourself, understand your life, and then remove it if you like. Would that be hard? How many software engineers do we have in the crowd? Would it be hard to write an application that reads the information off of a device like that and shows it to you in a great way, lets you understand yourself? Why do they not do that? Right. Because we are not just the consumer, we are the product. In that case, Fitbit, we are also the consumer. So the rule is if you're not paying, you are the product. You probably know that one. I mean, that's a good one to remember. But many cases, these days, even if you are paying, you're still the product. In all these ways, we are voluntarily and enthusiastically making ourselves very trackable. We know that. We are actively seeking more ways to be surveilled so that data can be collected so that we can connect with others and optimize our own lives. And those are good things to want, to optimize your own life and to connect with others. As I said, I think big data is not good or evil. It's just powerful. The question is, are the resources being devoted to use it in a way that will benefit you as an individual? Or are the resources being devoted to use it in a way that will treat you like a sheep? I think more the second than the first, in my opinion. But you can make your own decision. And we're going to talk some more about what's going on and what we think of that. So for the longest time, I've been talking about this kind of thing. And for a while, I thought that it was a fairly young technology, and there might be an opportunity to kind of corral it a little bit, to bend the technology to the will of humanity, to basically say, we want these kind of products to serve human interests. We don't want them to serve necessarily corporate or government interests. We want them to make our lives better as human beings. And you take anyone who works for a big corporation or government and you ask them, do you want to build the kind of world that you and your children want to live in? They'll be yes, right? So it's not like we don't all have a common interest here. It's interesting. I'm on a committee called USACM. ACM is the folks that hand out the Turing Award, like the Nobel Prize in Computer Science. You guys know about ACM, maybe? Association for Computing Machinery. Well, USACM is the public policy arm of ACM. They try to work with, especially U.S. lawmakers and the government, to try and be an honest broker of technology information. So the kind of idea is if you want to make some laws and they involve technology, we can tell you in a nonpartisan way what technology can and can't do, so that you're not like legislating, in a vacuum, right? We can tell you, these are the kind of problems that happen when you use technology in this way, or there is a solution to this problem, or there's not. And one thing I have learned over about a decade of being involved with USACM is that the way governments put down laws for companies are very different than the way they put them down for individuals. Like for individuals, the government passes a law and you feel like you have to do it, right? But for companies, it's more a matter of negotiation. The government says, we want this. And companies say, oh no, we couldn't possibly. That will ruin our business model. We can't do this. We can't do that. And then the government gets technology experts or other experts like us to come in and say, yes, you can. And then the companies say, no, we don't want to. And then what they do is they cuddle up to one company in this cluster and they get them to do what they want. And then they say to everyone else, see how happy they are? Look, they can do it. It worked out well. And then they let a little time pass and then they pick one of the companies in the cluster that's especially not doing what they're supposed to, and then they make an example out of them and they punish them. And then they say to everyone else, you wouldn't want to be like that one, would you? And so they try to herd them towards compliance. And that is even in the best case scenario where the government wants them to do the right thing. In this particular arena, the government's interests are also somewhat aligned to making us be sheep, as well as companies' interests. So it's a difficult climate in which to get action on this front. And the more companies become addicted to the wild west of data collection. We can collect whatever we want. We can keep it forever we want. We don't have to track where we got it, or we don't have to be right about it. We don't have to give anyone access. We don't have to admit we have this or that. No rules, Wild West. The harder it will be to herd them into compliance. The more they will say, our business model is absolutely dependent upon this. You cannot change it. So I think in many sense, I think the ship has sailed on some of this. I think it's going to be almost impossible, especially in the current government climate, to herd things back in any good way. But where we really have it right now today is primarily in the realm of advertising, suggesting, recommending. Where I think we may still have some hope is in big decisions about people's lives. Things like, if a big data analytic software produced a number that said you ought to go to jail, do you or do you not have the right to understand how that number was produced? This is not a hypothetical case. What case is this? Does anybody know? It's Loomis versus Wisconsin. Look it up. Maybe the Supreme Court will pick it up for review this month. We'll see. A defendant, Loomis, was sent to jail with consideration from a piece of software that gave him a number that said you're likely to be dangerous, you're likely to recommit crimes. And his defense lawyers said, we would like to be able to understand this black box, proprietary, not even open source software. We'd like to understand why it came up with this number. Doesn't that sound like due process? Do you guys live in the United States? Doesn't that sound like that should be okay? And Wisconsin said, no, you do not have that right. So is that going to stand or not? Will the Supreme Court of the United States do something about that? Will they pick up that case? So I would encourage you to go, so you can write, so Axiom, you guys are going to all look yourselves up in Axiom. Do you guys write that down? Loomis versus Wisconsin. I'm going to give you homework. Okay. What about hiring? Is that somewhat a regulated environment? Are there things you're allowed to consider or not consider when hiring someone? Yes. Are we going to have a world in which that's true when the hiring decision is incredibly influenced by some sorting algorithm that puts some resumes up or down, or some machine learning algorithm that tells you who they think you should hire? Are we still going to have those rights or not? I wouldn't say it's a given. And if you care about this, I suggest you get angry now rather than wait till it's, no hope anymore, as it mostly is for advertising suggestions and recommendations. So in many ways, I think we have a perfect storm. We have cheap disk space, tons of space to store things. Oh, let's just suck up everything we possibly can. We'll keep it forever. No problem. Fast and readily available network access to get things from the point of collection to the point of storage. We have all these new types of tracking devices that we all love and go pay money for because they're so cool. Of course, number one being your cell phone. What percentage of your life is your cell phone more than 2 or 3 feet away from you? Mine too. And, did you follow all the stuff out of the FCC, right? Of can your internet service provider, what can they sell about you? What can they record about you? Can they track about you? And part of what they said is having internet service is optional. You don't have to sign up for it if you don't want to. Is that true? Can you live effectively in the modern world without internet access? You can decide that, right? These decisions are very much in play. And if you have a strong opinion, if you look at that and you think, of course it's mandatory that I have that. Or if you say to yourself, of course you should have a right to look inside that black box software to understand why it gave you a number and sent you to jail. If you think that's true, that is not the way the United States of America is going these days. So if you care and if you live here, you might want to do something. You might want to get outraged now rather than wait. Of course, we also have the willingness of people to carry and use devices, the strong human desire to connect and share and optimize our lives and so many things, and somewhat of a disinterest in privacy. I think there is a general kind of feeling that I don't have anything to hide, so track me. I don't care. Look at everything. I don't think I have anything to hide. Now, when you say that, I think it's pretty important to consider that there have been very bad laws over time that you might not have felt you should obey. And if you think that that could happen at any point in the future, you might want to get outraged now rather than wait. The history of government, the kind of information that governments just get now, they used to torture people for. Who are your friends? If I told you that every time you made a friend, you had to go report it at the police station, would you be outraged? But how many times do we just hook up on Facebook, every new friend, right? If I told you you had to carry a tracking device with you at all times, would you feel like that was reserved for criminals? Like a tracking band around your ankle? You might. But we do it. And so in many ways right now we have uses of these technologies that are gentler. Suggestions, recommendations. But as I'm going to show you, it is quickly heading into more worrisome territory. And if you think that you don't have anything to hide, I would really encourage you to question that. Do you even have any idea all the laws that are on the books? I bet you that someone who really looked at your life could find something you've done that's illegal. Have you ever heard the thing innocent until investigated? How many people think that if I looked closely enough at your life, I could find something that you've done illegal? Okay. And one thing I think is that if it really were symmetrical, like if I get to know everything about you, you get to know everything about me, we get to know everything about the government, we get to know everything about corporations, just transparency to the ultimate. That isn't my first choice of a world, because I do think you have a right to keep things private from people that you don't think they have any right to judge you based on. So I'm not saying that's my first choice. But I think I could live in a world like that. Because I'll stack up my crazy against your crazy. If I get to see all yours, you get to see all mine, maybe we just get all over ourselves. And the really horrible stuff would stick out. Maybe. But that's not the way the world is going to be. The world is going to be all self-righteous, and it's going to be very unsymmetrical. There's going to be entities that know everything about you that want you to know nothing about them. And you know that's true. All you have to do is look at how the government reacts to, let's look at how the NSA is funded, right? Or let's answer questions about, how the president does this or that, right? So, or let's look at the way corporations are making decisions. Let's just open the kimono on this, right? No, that is not how it's going to be. Okay, so we talked about wearable devices quite a bit. I have 2 slides here on promise versus problem. What happens with wearable devices? What kind of information do you get? You get activity patterns, sleep patterns, heart rate, location. We talked about having to put it up in the cloud to even view it. And there's some really exciting things about that. Sorry. Text messages coming in. There's some really exciting things about that. Like, I think we have more data on sleep patterns than ever before in history. Like, have you ever heard the thing about starving college students paid to, sleep in a lab under a microscope? Well, I don't know why they didn't bother anymore, because, you got all this Fitbit data. You want to know whether the full moon keeps people up? Well, I bet they know, right? No problem. But, is there a problem? I mean, I bet you somewhere in their data is the fact that there's 2 people in the exact same place with high heart rate in the middle of the night, and that's none of your damn business, right? Okay, so that's a problem. We talked about these massively open online courses. So imagine all of your learning activities being done through a digitally facilitated platform. What kind of information did they get that they didn't get before? I already told you the idea of did you read all the reading or not? There's also how many times did it take you to get something? Did you have to listen to that lecture 3 times? Did you have to take that test 5 times? Or did you get it right away? And the promise of that is again, incredible. The idea you can get information to tens of thousands of people around the world in a free way. And also they can do massive beta testing on do people learn better if you teach topic A before B or B before A? Great possibility. But there's also big problems there. These MOOCs are trying to pay the bills. Many of them are offering the content for free. Is it reasonable for them to sell demographic information to employers about who's good at these tasks or not? And here's an interesting thing. You can say, I participated, and they sold information to a potential employer that indicated I was great at this, that helped me get a job, or they sold information that said I was bad at it, that made it hard for me to get a job. And you can think pro or con, how you feel about that. But here's another one. I didn't even participate. Not at all. But they used that demographic information to say, women your age do or do not. Or, men of your race do or do not. Are you okay with that one? That you didn't even participate, right? And all of this data, you can think about the ways it's collected. I mean, we looked at our digital exhaust, and most of that digital exhaust is already identified and linked to you specifically and directly through your credit card, your license plate, your, your home address, any of those things. It's not even a matter of being anonymous. They know exactly who you are. And you know that in the context of any individual relationship. You're like, yes, I bought that item from Amazon and they shipped it to my house. So clearly they know who I am and that I bought it. That's not a secret. But when they sell it to trusted partners, and really, what does it take for a partner to be trusted? Basically, it means they paid them some money, right? I trust you, gave me some money. That's pretty much what that is. Or shared with governments even. That's do you guys realize that's one big difference between data that you store locally on your premises versus data that you store in the cloud? Cloud stored data, governments can go get it, and the holder of that information is not even allowed to tell you that the information was requested. Whereas if it's on your local premises, they have to have a search warrant. And so you obviously had to know that they were coming to get it. That's a huge difference, right? Big difference. And then we're going to talk about sharing data anonymously. Remember, I asked you to think about what if I just took your internet search data, but I removed that it had your name. Was that okay? We're going to talk about that some more. Of course, in a conference like this, we can think about what if it's stolen by hackers, right? any entity that you trust, maybe you even trust them not to share it with other businesses or governments, although I don't know how you possibly could, but say you did, are they keeping it securely or not, right? It's a valuable resource. It draws interested parties, right? And of course there's insider misuse. What is, the idea that, someone working at that company might be searching for information or, whistleblowing it out to the world, or you don't know, right? So again, big data is not necessarily good or evil. It's powerful. And once you've allowed it all to be collected and correlated, you've lost the control over where it goes. So it's not, you can't think about it as just in the context of the relationship in which you revealed it. So there's data, as I said, that you're revealing to support a specific goal. Another category is data you do not know you are revealing or you don't believe is being recorded. Remember I told you the idea of like you're using an e-reader and you had no idea I was going to get a report about you? I saw an article about, there was a newspaper reporter who worked for a paper and they gave her a cell phone and they told her to use it all week or something like that. And at the end of the week she turned it in. And she had taken pictures of her children. And maybe she even knew, like, it's not a good idea to take a picture of your child next to your address on your house or next to the name of their school and post it on media because you're basically, giving a map to your children. But, like, the GPS tagging feature was on all the pictures. So in the course of the week, that mother had mapped out, the children's bedroom, their homeroom at school, the location of the babysitter, the route they took to school. And that was an example they didn't even realize, right? So there's things you are revealing. There's things you don't even realize you're revealing. There's stuff where you don't think that you're revealing anything, and maybe they don't link it directly to you, but they recognize you when they see you again. And I gave you the example of RFID. But there's other things like that, like, you're just browsing the web. When you're browsing the web, you might feel anonymous. You're like, I'm at home, I'm just browsing the web. Of course, there's your ISP could be tracking you and they know who you are. But let's even say, that you are, at an, internet cafe or in a library or something like that. But still, that device can be fingerprinted, right? The idea that, even like my laptop, no matter where it goes, has a fairly unique combination of the exact browser version, all of the plugins that are installed, my language preferences, blah, blah, blah. If you ever gone to the EFF digital kind of fingerprinting thing, what is it called, Panopticlick or something like that, they'll tell you how unique in their data set your exact combination of weirdness is. And just like RFID, when they see that, they may not be able to say, Jeanna Matthews. But they might if I associate myself with it at any time. And even if not, they can see me as I go, again and again. Similarly, things like, I don't know if you follow the degree to which people can be recognized by little snippets of text. Like you do an anonymous blog post. Can they tell who you are? You might be shocked to see with high degree of accuracy from little bits of text. A lot of it is like little linguistic tics we use, like how often we say okay, or how often we use exclamation points, or ... or like it's not so much the big words that are the tells, it's often the small things. Or they can tell, like, is English your first language? They can tell, like, are you from the South? Or from the, the ability to zero in on somebody is kind of crazy. Like, do you see how quickly they recognize what was her name? Liberty Chance or something, whatever, the NSA contractor. I'm probably getting her name wrong. I think it was from, every printer has a kind of unique, pattern. And so they could see when it was printed and, okay. So anytime you feel anonymous, you really ought to question that. There are ways to do anonymity, but you are not going to be good at it without a lot of practice, because there's so many ways you leak things. So many ways. Same with writing code. You think you can contribute code anonymously? Again, how many little tells are there in the way, like anything? One thing I like to say when I do this talk is people often feel anonymous when they check out someone's public profile on Facebook. Not like you're a friend of theirs or whatever, but you just went and checked out their public profile. Not so much even then. And if you want me to tell you more about that, I will. Often people go, oh, I don't know. I didn't know that. It's not ironclad, but, and then, so there's data you know you're revealing, data you don't know you're revealing, that are both directly linked to you as a person. So these are identifiable data. There's data that's not directly identifiable, but it might not be very many hops away from being identifiable. And here's another important thing to understand, is stuff that is anonymous today may not be anonymous tomorrow. Because the more and more ability to analyze and understand and correlate and cross-correlate goes up all the time, the more other data sets are out there. And then, as I said, there's the idea of predictions. A little like I said about the demographic data in MOOCs. I didn't even participate. You can't possibly be recognizing me individually or even recognize me when you see me again, but you guess I will or won't be good at it just on my demographics. Or, what about if you like the page for a disease on Facebook? Like, you like the Diabetes Association page. Does that mean you have diabetes? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But what if I decide, okay, close enough. I'm not hiring you because I think you're going to have big bills down the road. It's just a guess. Is that freedom of speech? And companies that make guesses like this, that's what they'll say. We're not violating HIPAA or your privacy. It's not even about you. And I have every right of freedom of speech to guess whatever I want. This is actually pretty quiet, but because I put it against this plastic, it vibrates. And I don't have a pocket. I'm going to try it again. We'll see. There's crazy things like, did you hear the thing about the girl bought prenatal vitamins at Target and she got something that went home and that's how her parents found out she was pregnant? So buying prenatal vitamins is probably a pretty strong tell. But even like your heart rate being up on Fitbit, they can tell people who are pregnant from that, yeah.
When I read about that case originally, I thought it was that she didn't even know that she was pregnant.
No, I think she knew.
She did? Okay.
Yes, that's the buying of prenatal vitamins, I think. But, yeah. That is another thing, is I've heard many people doing machine learning say that we're going to know you better than you do. We know you better. Have you seen those things that say on Facebook, we can predict better about you than your best friends? Have you seen those kind of things? Like from your Facebook profile, we can predict with high accuracy certain things about you better than your friends can. And I've also heard people say, I especially heard this claim in the context of learning, how people learn best, people who are like totally instrumenting students and watching them and how they learn and whatever. And I've heard them saying, we're going to understand how you learn better than you do. See, we're basically entering a zone where it's not just going to be suggestions of things you want to buy or suggestions of people you might want to be friends with or suggestions of videos you might want to watch, because you might say, suggestions are mild. We are really entering more of a zone where your big data and machine learning derived conclusions become your destiny. And you think that's hyperbole. It's not. You don't get that job. You don't go to that school. You don't get to borrow that money. You don't get so many things. Yeah. As I said, we've mostly seen this used for advertising. But even in advertising, is it illegal to write in a housing advertisement, we don't want any families here, or we don't want any people of that race here? Damn right, it's illegal. It is illegal. But if I can use the targeted advertising features of social media platforms and say, I would like people without families to see this ad, or I'd like people in this age group to see that ad, is that any different? You tell me how that's different. We are entering a new zone where the protections we think we have in the courts, in hiring, in credit, in many important life-changing arenas are shifting. And like I said, I felt for many years, like I said, the window is narrowing for controlling this big data privacy stuff. I think the ship has sailed, but I still think there is a window left for big, important, regulated decisions. Like we're supposed to have due process. Damn it, can we keep that or not? I'm not sure, but I'd really like to convince more people to care and fight for it. Can we insist that we still have the rights in hiring that we have now? I would like to think we can manage that, but I am not at all sure. So I really hope at the end of this talk you say to yourself, I am not going to wait until I get screwed over or my friend or my family that I love gets screwed over. I'm going to just get pissed off now. I'm going to care now. Because it is serious. And, you know, I'm a pretty optimistic, happy person. You don't know me for anything. But I'm not a conspiracy that, like, I don't have a tin hat on or whatever. But you really, all you have to do is pay attention. If you really pay attention to the way things are going, I think the conclusion is clear. So more and more big data is being fed into machine learning algorithms that are made, like I said, you know, credit decisions, bail, do you get bail or not, college admissions, housing decisions, allocation of public resources. And they don't even have to look at potentially discriminatory attributes. You follow me a second and you see if this scares you. I could write a software system that doesn't even look at the religion category. Doesn't even look at it. Not there at all. But do you think I might be able to infer that based on who your friends or family are? Do you think I might be able to infer that based on who knows what else? With high degree of accuracy? And you can ask, maybe my guess is right or wrong. Let's just say it's only right 98% of the time. And so you tell me which is worse. You're in the 98% I'm right about or the 2% I'm wrong about. Okay? And what if I could sell this software system as a completely unbiased decision made by computer? Doesn't even look at the religion category, I promise. Does that make it any less discriminatory? You think I might be able to sell that to anyone for a Muslim ban, for example? Think I might get a lot of money for that one. If I really wrote it in a way that they could convince everyone was a completely unbiased decision made by computer. Anyone shopping around for that these days? You tell me. So, I think we have a need to demand a level of algorithmic transparency and accountability. The more big decisions are made with machine learning algorithms based on all of our digital exhaust, the more we need to be able to ask, why did you offer that job to that person and not this person? Why did this person get to borrow money to buy a house and this person did not? Why is there going to be more police surveillance in this neighborhood than in that one? How many people say, I think we have a right to ask those questions? Those should not just be black box decisions spit out by proprietary software systems. Anyone want to vote against that? That is not the way it's going to be unless we do something. And as much as those systems can be sold as completely unbiased decisions made by computers, you know as well as I do, being computing type folks, that there's so many ways that bias can be built into software. Of course, if the programmer has some active bias, they could write it that way. But let's just pretend for a moment that that is not at all the case. The programmers went in with the best of intentions, but the software was trained using big data. Are there biases that are inherent in big data these days? I don't know, there was a great example of a big data machine learning algorithm kind of thing that was trained using all of these news articles, tons and tons and tons of news articles, language in news articles. And then once you've trained it with all this language, you can ask things like SAT style questions. Man is to woman as king is to queen, or something like that. And it gets it right. But here's one, and this is totally no joke. Man is to woman as computer programmer is to homemaker. That's true. That is a legitimate result out of, and this isn't even like biased speech. This is like, legit journalists. But we have so much bias inherent in our society. Maybe it is just historical biases that, some people got opportunities and some people didn't, and so that's the way things are now. But does that say anything fundamental about an individual and their ability to be a homemaker or a programmer, right? On either side, right? So there are so many places that bias creeps in. And when we don't have an opportunity to open the hood on these systems and delve into them, we just want to treat them like, especially their proprietor. There's a company trying to make money off of this. They're trying to do it as cheaply as possible for as much profit as possible. That is scary. Don't you think that's scary? That is the way it is. And here's another one if you want to Google around a little bit. I think it's Northpoint, I think, is the company that writes the Compass software that is used to predict whether someone will commit another crime. So look around at that one. Here's an example. How many people in here feel like they have some appreciation of machine learning algorithms and how they work? Like you have a big pile of data, you're going to point out, there's a bunch of different machine learning algorithms, right? There's decision trees, there's neural nets, there's, all sorts of possibilities, right? And they vary a lot in many aspects, how efficient they are. Another way they vary is how well they can export a human readable explanation of how they came to the conclusion they came to. Here is, a bunch of digits, handwritten digits. And you can point machine learning algorithms at those digits and you can say, learn to recognize the digits when people write them. Okay, that doesn't sound like too scary of a task, right? Do you think the computer can get good at that? Yeah, it can. And you might, as a person, expect to say something like, ones are all about the vertical, and fives have a horizontal component, and so do fours, and eights are all curvy. But no, this thing right here in the middle, that is the explanation of how the computer recognizes those digits. Can you look at that and can you glean something like, we're looking for men of this race or women of this age or something like that? Say it's not digits, it's people. Like, you look at that and you get a human readable understanding of what the heck's happening there? You don't really, right? Okay, here's another one. Imagine I give you a bunch of pictures of wolves and dogs. And I say, okay, and you know how these things work, right? You have a set that's labeled correctly, wolves and dogs. And then you tell the machine learning algorithm to learn, and then you give it a set that's not labeled, and you say, how accurate were you? How well did you predict dog or wolf? And then if it's correct enough, now you're going to do it on stuff you don't even know. And that's going to become the destiny of that thing, wolf or dog, right? Right? You know how this works, okay? So, here is actually a human readable explanation of why this is classified as a wolf. Do you notice that it's highlighting the snow? Could you imagine that being very predictive of whether it's a wolf or a dog, whether there's snow in the picture? Now, do you understand the implication of that? Does it matter whether there's snow in the picture as to whether you're a dog or a wolf? Does it matter? In your lifetime, you will be a dog in the snow. Period. The question is, one, will you ever know it happened? And two, if you're able to figure out it happened, will anyone care? When you say, I am a dog, I am not a wolf, I don't care that there's snow here. I am still a dog. I still deserve that job. I still deserve not to go to jail. I still deserve to get into that college. I still deserve whatever. And they say no. The computer says no. And do you realize that implies so much information that you even know that they were looking at snow? For the most part, you're just going to get no. And I hope that sinks in. I really, really do. Let's see. So we are pretty much out of time. I had more things I was going to tell you about anonymity and big data and how hard it is to make things anonymous. I think in the last minute I will recommend 2 books, Data and Goliath by Bruce Schneier and Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. I especially recommend the Weapons of Math Destruction one because I bet you the Data and Goliath stuff is all about surveillance. And I bet as people in this con, you probably know most of that. But the Weapons of Math Destruction, I bet it would shock you, some of the stuff in that book. So I've given you some homework. How many people are going to do their homework? Looking up Axiom, Loomis versus Wisconsin, reading Weapons of Math Destruction. Do you promise? Okay, how many people say, I think I'm ready to get a little outraged? Okay, please. We really need that. Okay? Questions? Yes?
What do you think about social steganography techniques, like putting out misinformation about yourself out there? It sounds simple as using like a fake name, putting something in your actual city, or using different information at different places. It's kind of pleasant.
Yeah, so you know that if you don't have any credit history, like borrowing and returning, is that considered good credit history or bad credit history? That's as bad as it gets, as you don't have any, right? I worry that we're entering a world where if we don't provide an accurate signal of ourselves, that we will be suspect. We're not far from that. So you tell me which is better or worse. And this is one of the things, is we are already in a world where people cannot predict the cost of doing something. And I think I had a slide about this. Yeah. So if I like something on Facebook, yes or no, what are the potential downsides to me? Maybe I don't get a job because I like the diabetes page. Or maybe I do. Or maybe it doesn't matter. So this is the decision I've made. I'm going to live like I'm free until I'm not. And then they can do with me what they want. And you can decide how you want to live. I did the mental exercise where I said, what would it be like to drop out of society? I read this book about someone who really went that way. Like, they put all their money in a trust. They had anything shipped to a Dropbox, so it wasn't officially associated with them. And do you know what happened to them? For Christmas, their aunt got them a magazine subscription to their actual house. So basically, do you want to have friends and family over to your house? Do you want to connect with people or not? Do you want to live paranoid? I've decided that I don't want to live paranoid. So I am my true self. Many of the cons like this, they do the anonymity and I'm always who I am, where I am. You can find things about me. And I understand the cost of that. I do. But and I like what I want to like on Facebook, and I say politically outrageous things. And I have tenure, for God's sake. So if I can't do it, who can? And I would rather go down in the first wave with a bullet to the head than I would live like I'm afraid. So you can pick your path. And you might think I'm being dramatic, and I don't think I'm being dramatic enough. Everyone I know who looks carefully at the details of what's actually happening comes away feeling like our society has already been gutted. So all I can say is educate yourself, care now, get outraged now. It's way past time. Other questions? Okay, thanks for listening. Can you unplug me?